Welcome, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the OER Dynamic Coalition webinar on Quality OER. Thank you very much for coming to this special Dynamic Coalition event, which is on Quality OER during Open Education Week 2022. Today's discussion will be on Quality OER, and as you may be aware, the OER recommendation on OER was adopted unanimously at the General Conference at its 40th session in November 2019, and it supports the creation, use, and adaptation of inclusive and quality OER and facilitates cooperation in this field. It's the only existing international standard-setting instrument on OER. The text of this recommendation is available on the UNESCO website. If you type legal instruments recommendation on OER UNESCO, you'll come to the page on the left and you'll have the entire text in all of the 6 languages of the UN. I'd like to highlight, before we start, one important point, and it's the definition of OER in this document. And it is that it provides, this is the basis for our work in this area. It's that OER are learning, teaching, research materials that are in the public domain or under an open license that permits no cost access, reuse, repurposing, adaptation, and redistribution by others. And you have the definition of open license in point 2 below. The OER Dynamic Coalition, which was launched by UNESCO in 2020, has been established to support the implementation of the recommendation. And it's part of this dynamic coalition that we have this regular cycle of webinars to facilitate the sharing of expertise and knowledge and experience in different areas of action. And in this perspective, we are organizing today one on quality OER. Now, quality OER, quality assurance is fundamental to open educational resource mainstreaming, of course, and we believe that it's important to have a discussion on the different approaches of OER quality and explore strategies and innovative technologies to monitor the quality, this quality issue. The slide on the screen outlines the part of the OER recommendation that is relevant to this. And this is point 3, and it's on encouraging effective, inclusive, equitable access to quality OER. What's point F on your screen? Is the last point. Developing and adapting existing evidence-based standards, benchmarks, and related criteria for quality assurance of OER as appropriate, which emphasizes reviewing educational resources under regular quality assurance mechanisms. That is the direct reference in the recommendation. However, this area, with regards to fitness for purpose, talks about other issues that are important for the quality of OER. And in that case, we're talking about that which relates to inclusiveness, accessibility, and equitable access. And those are the points which are highlighted on the screen. The webinar's objective is to raise awareness and share knowledge on this area. And we have 3 very distinguished speakers. We have Professor Dr. Ulf-Daniel, full professor for educational management and lifelong learning at Baden-Wuerttemberg Cooperative State University, Karlsruhe, Germany. Dr. Francine Barbosa, Associate Professor, Institute of Mathematics and Computer Science, ICMC, University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Dr. Sahan Bulathwela, Research Assistant, Machine Learning and Data Mining for Human AI and X5 GON at University College London, UK. After the presentations, we will have a discussion period. For questions relating to the presentation of Dr. Ehlers, we will take the questions right away because Dr. Ehlers will unfortunately have to go to another meeting immediately after his presentation. With that, I give the floor to Dr. Ehlers. Dr. Ehlers, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. If you have questions regarding my presentation, you can email me if you like, and you find all the information on the web. I'm talking about the topic of quality in OER today. It's a topic I'm working on in different projects and contexts and in different networks since about 15 years. We are noticing a change in the discussion in the scientific papers, in the literature, but also in the organizations and on the policy level. Whereas before, much of the discussion and debate on quality OER was dedicated to definitions of metadata, for example, and to accessibility. We now, more and more in the last 2 or 3 years, come into a zone in which we are also discussing review mechanisms, specific quality mechanisms, specific didactics for guiding learners in the open as quality tools for OER. Specific artificial intelligence recommendation tools which are having the power to choose and select OER for learners within the frame of their lifelong learning pathway. So there is a change which is happening in the discussion. And in a recent project which we started, we aim to, for the European wider region, we aim to collect and harvest the experiences around these issues, to bring them together in a defragmented network. The project is called European Network for Catalyzing in Open Resources in Education. It's an ongoing project. You will find all information here on the web. We have many project partners, and the logic of the project is to work on 5 different distinct issues which directly or indirectly have to do with quality. We feel that there is a lack currently of the corporate sector, but also in institutions of the higher education sector. We can see that repositories, while they are maturing and maturing further and further, are not yet ready to really work together in a regional ecosystem or even a global ecosystem of repositories. And we work together with the colleagues of the UK, of London, which work also on the project of X5 Gone, for example, which you will hear more later on from my colleague, which gives the 3rd presentation. We also see that the OER community is fragmented between the educational sectors, for example, and we believe that they can learn from each other, and we would like to bring them together into a common community. And we believe that there is a lack of discussion how open education and open education resources can also be a catalyst for innovation in higher education and in other education settings, providing opportunities for learners to mature on their pathway to become autonomous on their lifelong learning pathway. We also believe firmly that the issue of quality is one issue which needs more attention, and we very, very much appreciate the recommendation of the UNESCO, and the project has adopted as its purpose also to put the UNESCO recommendation into practice, to translate it and to recommend it to the European policy ecosystem on open education. We're working with 4 different instruments, or one instrument in 4, let's say, nuances, which we call circles. We have set up circles which are nothing else than, nothing less than communities of practice. And one of these circles we have specifically dedicated to the issue of OER quality. The circle is meeting regularly, now always in what we call thematic peer groups. That is the circle instrument, thematic peer groups. And we are always meeting in cycles of 4 meetings. And then the cycle is over in 4 months, each month 1 meeting. If you're interested to take part in such a cycle, Also, if you're not from Europe, please let us know. We will invite you to our next round of cycles, of workshops, thematic peer group workshops, which will start in fall. The spring ones are currently underway. The project is publishing positions on the different issues we are working on: policy, institutional policy, quality, technology, and so on. And you will find their innovation briefings on different issues on the website. I would like to go to some empirical findings for the remaining 2 minutes, which I have. We have asked around 450 stakeholders from the OER, let's say, larger scene, how confident they feel with quality. And we can see that between leaders and managers in businesses and in higher education and professional educators, there is a difference. The leaders are not so confident, and the professional educators are much more confident, with different dimensions of quality. And we see this issue is representative. The issue is representative for many, many other attitudes and expectations and experiences with quality, with OER. And we call this the gap between leaders and practitioners. And we believe very much that in institutions, we need much more multi-stakeholder fora to communicate between these two. One, the leaders of institutions, policymakers of institutions, and the practitioners. The second issue and finding which I would like to share with you is that we see a changing environment in the stakeholders. Within higher education, we find more and more that there is less fundamental resistance to go into the open with learning materials, to use open educational resources, and to promote openness in education. However, we can also see that there are very different attitudes towards that. There are educators, and we have created personas for that. There are educators who are open to share everything anytime that's natural to them. Then there are educators who say, we would share actually, but if only we would do that only if our institution is encouraging us to do and supporting us to do. And then there are also educators which are not really opposed to OER, but which are also not particularly fond of sharing. But as, let's say, if they would be taken on board, if they would be supported, if there would be training, if there would maybe be policies, they would jump on board, they would not oppose. So we believe very much the future of quality OER needs to work on quality cultures, which are including open educational resources within our institutions. We believe that we are entering a new, let's say, decade in which resistance is declining, in which we have to in a very target group specific way to argue with teachers, with professors in the institutions with which we are working in order to take them aboard. But we believe that we are entering a phase in which OER is really on the verge of an uptake. And we believe that's good, and we invite you to join our project, stay connected, and influence the discourse in Europe and the wider global world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ehlers, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this presentation. I understand you have to go exactly right this minute, so we'd like to thank you for your time. And if you do have questions, we will put in the chat Dr. Ehlers' email. Please feel free to send a message to Dr. Ehlers directly. And thanks again, and good luck. Our next speaker is Dr. Francine Barbosa. The floor is yours, Dr. Barbosa.
I'm Ellen from Brazil, from the University of São Paulo. I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I will talk a little bit about quality attributes for open educational research. And then I will focus on the impact of OER metadata on OER quality. So there is a wide availability of OER to the global community. But how can we guarantee the quality of such resources? Actually, ensuring the quality of OER should be a crucial concern, especially because OER can be developed and made available by anyone, not just educators. We have some initiatives which work on quality attributes and quality models to design, to evaluate, and to improve the quality of OER. However, a more complete and comprehensive analysis of how quality is being handled for OER is still missing. And at this point, our first goal arises, which is provide an overview of the main quality attributes and quality models for OER existing in the literature. To do so, we adopted a more theoretical perspective by performing a systematic mapping on quality attributes for OER. Here we have our research questions. I will focus only in the first question, which is, what are the quality models and quality attributes proposed for OER? We have our search string, our search base. We use the 6 base for searching. And after applying the entire process of a systematic mapping, we found only 9 full papers dealing with quality of OER. Here we have a complete list of the 9 papers retrieved. And then, since many of the OER can be considered as software as well, at first, we tried to analyze the ISO quality attributes for software, whether they were addressed by the retrieved papers. And we could notice that some of the quality attributes were addressed in almost all papers, for instance, accessibility or usability. But we had another quality attributes such as security, testability, portability, which had only a few occurrences in the papers, in the retrieved papers. So these attributes in particular, they deserve more attention. Also, as part of this work, we also tried to identify the educational quality attributes addressed by each one of the retrieved primary studies in our systematic mapping. So, at the top of our table, we have the most prevalent ones, such as navigability, accuracy of content, learning goal alignment, and so on. And at the bottom of the table, we have the less prevalent ones. And here I would like to highlight metadata accuracy. And this attribute, this quality attribute, was considered only by 2 studies and in a very superficial way. So at this point, we get our second goal, which was to analyze the impact of metadata on the quality of OER. And to do so, now we adopted a more practical perspective by performing an exploratory study on OER metadata. In our study, we analyzed more than 1 million metadata from 8 OER repositories. We use web crawlers to perform an automatic extraction of metadata, of course. And also we did some automatic and manual processing. And by the results, we noticed that several metadata have not been considered during the search. Actually, metadata have been used for this descriptive purpose only. And about only 28% of metadata are really used by the OER search mechanism. The other are not accessible for the users during the search. And this is a very huge problem because OER quality is directly related to their metadata. The lack of relevant metadata can hide qualified resources, can hide good quality resources in OER collections. And here, I would like to highlight three main aspects related to the metadata. Accuracy, OER metadata must be directly related to OER content, and we didn't see this in our research. Standards compliance, the use of standards is important to enabling service interoperability and content exchange. For instance, we found more than 13 ways to put date in the metadata. And this is a very simple thing, but it can hinder the search, a good search. And understandability, the OER and their metadata must be easy to understand. Failure of any of these items will impact the quality of the OER. And what kind of impact? For instance, lack of relevant terms in the metadata, which increases the difficulty of identifying relevant resources. Lack of documentation to support users in understanding the meaning of each metadata. Lack of standardization to describe the same information, as I told before, date, research time, and so on. Poor metadata description. Internal asymmetry, we found resources from the same OER repository collections that have different metadata. And external asymmetry, OER collections have adopted different set of metadata, and this makes the integrated searches more critical. So I have a little time. So to conclude, I would like to highlight two main problems here. We have a gap between the literature and practice on quality, on dealing with quality on open educational resources. Several approaches have been proposed in the literature, but they seem to be far from the OER reality. And our hypothesis here, and needs further investigation, of course, is that we are putting much more attention on specialists instead of also considering the regular users of OER, such as students, teachers, technologists. And most of our evaluations have been carried out only into controlled environments with few resources and metadata. And this impacts the quality of our research as well. The second problem I would like to stress is how to identify good quality OER with bad metadata. We found a lot of hidden resources into OER collections, and these resources cannot be retrieved by using their bad metadata. So the really important question here is how can we identify these good quality resources? And my perspective of research here is to put effort on the quality of the metadata. So I talked just a little bit about this, but for more information, I put here some of our papers on the theme. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barbosa. That's a very fascinating presentation on use of metadata for identifying OER and OER quality. Now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Sahan, who is at University College London, who's working on a project linked to AI, and it's called X5Gone, which was referred to earlier also. Sahan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zainab. Hello, everyone. I'm Sahan Bulathwela, and I'm affiliated with the Center for Artificial Intelligence at UCL, University College London. And in the past few years, we've been working on this European Union funded project called X5Gone, which was, trying to, identify identifying most of the problems and challenges that were pointed out by Dr. Ehlers and Dr. Barbosa. Apologies. We were trying to see how we can leverage AI and technological innovations to streamline this. And now we've again moved into a subsequent project called Human AI, where we are trying to see how we can improve human AI collaboration in day-to-day tasks. And we are taking X5GON as a potential application where we can improve these innovations to connect computers with humans in order to achieve high quality education. So a small background about the X5GON project. As you can see from this figure, there are hundreds of open educational resource repositories that are distributed and scattered around the world, and they are fragmented. And but how people's learning works is we don't have very narrow knowledge needs where we can just go to one repository and have all our needs fulfilled. So there is a huge demand for these fragmented communities and informational collections to be available under one central place where we can connect the right users with the right information at the right time. And X5GON is a project that tries to take a stab at that. And we've been using artificial intelligence to detect open educational resources and then use artificial intelligence to enrich and understand these materials so that we can connect it with users using approaches that were mentioned before in the previous talks, such as search and recommendation. And we have already identified about 100,000 materials from some major repositories, and we are counting more and more materials into our collection. And in a nutshell, X5GON has a technical aspect where we have these materials that we detect using our scrapers, just like Dr. Barbosa said, they were finding these materials. And then we have this data pipeline where we would go take these files and we would extract the content. If it's a PDF, we will take the text out. If it's a video, we will transcribe it and try to get the informational content of these materials. And then we will run various enrichments on it. And part of that is making quality assessments, because we are working with hundreds of thousands of these materials, and we need to do quality assurance and quality management at scale. So that is where we would take this information and then we would try to make quality assessments of it. And when we talk about the word quality, something that we understood from the previous two talks as well is that it is a very loaded word. There are various aspects of quality, and we went around trying to figure out what it is in 2019, looking at various different information retrieval domains. And we saw that there are overarching verticals such as authority, like the reputation of authors, organizations, the topics themselves. Then there are things like understandability. How recent are these materials? Is this knowledge relevant? And then what type of topics are covered? And does this video have bad sound? Are the words clear enough? And is the language clear enough for people to understand? So all of these things are, they make this whole thing called quality, and trying to build one system that can do all of this is a very challenging task. So initially what we did was we started off going with the low-hanging fruits, where, X5GON having a model where we would go to repositories and ingest their materials. We have a good idea about where different materials come from. So initially we would label these materials with the sources that we harvest them from in order to provide some quality indication about the materials. However, what you can see here is there is an obvious flow here. This makes a huge bias based on the reputation. And there are very brilliant teachers out there who would not be associated with these high caliber names, but who create very useful materials. So we want to go beyond that. And to do that, what we've been doing is we've been resorting more into the realms of machine learning. And when it comes to machine learning, usually a conventional machine learning task, we take data where we have labels, in this particular case, some indication of quality, and then we would try to find patterns in this material that we can map to this quality, and based on that, try to build an inference model. So in order to do this, what we saw is that some of these attributes that we found related to or associated to quality can be automatically extracted from some of the annotations that we do in X5GONE. And then when it comes to quality labels, there are two ways in machine learning. You can get explicit labels where the users would say, this is a high quality material, this is a medium quality material, people use star ratings, etc. And then there's implicit signals, such as, a person engaging with the material, showing that there is usefulness and consumability of a material. So in our case, we had access to this interaction data coming from videolectures.net, where people were watching educational videos. And based on that, we tried to build a supervised learning model to predict the overall engageability of materials based on the type of language that is used in these video lectures, the length of a video, then the type of topics that are covered in this video, etc. And what we found out was it is a fairly feasible thing to do. So what you see in this slide is a result where if we take the data set from video lectures and we rank them based on how much percentage of the video the population would watch in general, if we use the prediction model that we built to predict that, the correlation between the ranks is almost up to about 75%. So, I mean, this is not solving the problem, but we are looking at annotating our materials with certain aspects of quality, such as engageability or understandability, by looking at data that correlate with quality. Some of the other findings that we saw was that when you take these engagement ratings signals that come from the videos, they correlate with the star ratings that these videos got as well, which is a very promising suggestion that there are relationship between how people perceive quality. And from here, having this type of quality instruments, now we can make this a part of our enrichment process. And as Dr. Barbosa said, one of the key problems with open educational resources is metadata being misaligned with the actual content. And what we are trying to do here is, through this pipeline, we of course harvest the metadata, but we also try to harvest our own version of metadata, where we would look at the content and we would associate Wikipedia topics to that to come up with our own annotations of what information is available within these materials, what language they are from, and what different textual contents is available within this material. So we are creating our own ecosystem, our versions of additional metadata, which we use in our search engines to, find much more relevant and aligned materials to users' needs. And recently with the Human AI project, we've been now trying to connect with users and try to engage them, because in Dr. Ehlers' talk, one of the things that was pointed out is most of the people's perception of quality is people make their own judgment of quality. They rely on other people's judgments or recommendations. And one of the things we would want to look at is how can we harvest that and tap into that. And as to empower people to make quality judgments, one of the things that we do with X5 Learn, which is the user-facing learning platform that is sitting on top of X5GONE, is we give users these cues about quality. When we present them with results for their search queries, we tell them how recent are these materials, where do they come from, and if we have information about their duration, if it's a video, etc., we will provide them that information that they can make a judgmental decision. I mean, one of the things that you can't see here is that, in the actual platform, when you hover over this timeline, it also shows you different Wikipedia topics that are dominating in that part of the material, which also gives them some information about the topical contents of the materials. And going into, when a user chooses to go into a material, we have a video player where we can again try to capture the implicit consumption behaviors of the user with the material, which can feed into the machine learning models that I proposed earlier. And also something that we've been doing recently is to try to understand how we can encourage users to provide us with explicit information about quality as part of their interaction process with this platform. And in the future, what this will lead us to is trying to figure out how we can use these labels to better understand materials, especially when we are working with the scale of hundreds of thousands of materials that are coming from multiple languages, multiple modalities, etc. When you have time, I encourage you to also visit x5learn.org and do searches. And at the same time, X5Gone is very interested in ingesting new repositories into our platform so that we can index more repositories that are fragmented together to be accessible to the world population from one place. So if you have any support you can give us on that front, we are very welcome to have a conversation and see how we can collaborate. Thank you very much. That is what I wanted to present today. Once again, if you want to contact me and follow up on this, you can contact me via my email. And yes, I hope this was a fruitful session for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sahan Bulathwela, for this excellent presentation on how AI can enhance the development of OER. We will now open the floor to the discussion. We have some questions. The first question is how AI works to provide quality to OER.
When you look at the literature, one of the things you can see is there's standards and there's this specific thing where we build specific quality instruments that address different parts of overarching quality, the concept of quality. So at least on our end, what we've been focusing on trying to identify these different components or different areas of quality and try to see if we can build prediction models that could approximate these factors. And also in doing so, try to understand if we can build explainable models where we can understand what patterns are captured by these artificial intelligence models. For example, when you look at video lectures, the papers, the citation was also there in the paper. We also show this analysis where you could see how the longer video gets, how that discourages users to drop out from the video, and how having multiple long pauses within a video discourages users to disengage with a material. So that way, what we try to do is to have a data-centric model that also explains the natural phenomenon, but helps us to scalably make additional annotations that we can use in different systems to either inform the user or sometimes make rankings or recommendations based on these values as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And just to complement, AI is very important to make the search better, right? And even in the context of the metadata, we need to apply AI also to improve our search and to improve the user experience in searching. If we use the AI to do so, it will be great, and we'll have a more quality OER retrieved also in conformance with the users really want, right? And we need to use AI to improve this. I think it's crucial.
I would like to just probably bring up a fact that perhaps some of the participants are thinking right now, some of them that have joined from the more traditional higher education world that is working in, that has, as you said, I think it was Sahan who said that quality is a loaded word. It's a loaded word. It's like it's a machine gun. You know, it's really it's got so many different connotations. And in the higher education, traditional world of higher education, before OER, before digital became mainstream, before everything, quality assurance was a word that was used, usually based on having criteria linked to accreditation. And quality assurance in the world of quality assurance, whether it's for beer bottles or it's for educational resources, it was about fitness for purpose, and that it was good the first time around. That was a measure of quality, that whatever you're doing works the first time around. That's just an industry measure of quality, if you like. We have a question from our colleague in Omar Joma that is about criteria is used. What criteria is used, and is criteria used by the system in determining whether OER is good or not? And I would like you to, it's in the chat, I'd like you, if you could respond to this question, but also I would like to just bring one point up that's really important in the quality assurance discussion, is that we're talking in quality assurance, this discussion will be talking about curriculum and learning materials and how they would be of quality. And I think it's important to note also that we're also talking about the use of materials which are available digitally, otherwise don't really have metadata, and that this is about learning materials which are openly licensed, digital, and have metadata on them. And that's one step above what some people are really, it's really advanced in the discussion, if you like, than just open educational resources and just quality assurance. So I think we just have to appreciate that we're talking on subjects here that are not as mainstream as they are discussed within other circles on this point. So I leave it at that, but I would like you, you have the question from our colleague Omar. So Dr. Bulathwela, would you like to address it first?
Yes, I mean, in terms of, how it aligns with different curricula, for example, at this point, we rely on metadata to determine these determinations. But there is also an argument that, at least some of the colleagues that I work with that have been bringing out in the educational data mining community, saying that there are two aspects of quality that we have to think about. One is the context agnostic quality, which doesn't associate with the user's context, which means it doesn't associate with what the user already knows, what interests the user has, which is a personal state. Versus then there's the context agnostic quality, which means in general, where does this material stand in terms of engageability or alignment with learning goals, etc. And the work that I presented today mainly deals with context agnostic quality, which is making a general estimate of where these materials stand in terms of reaching out to a population. But in X5 Learn, for example, there's another line of work that my group is doing called the True Learn algorithm, which is a personalization algorithm, which takes this as one factor, but also takes into account the user's interest and the knowledge state to further see how aligned that material is with the learner. So that way, if you think about the learning platform, eventually the goodness depends on all of these factors, giving information for the system to make that decision. But also user then gives us feedback about how they thought it was aligned. And so that way, the goodness actually depends on the context as well.
Yes, I agree. And content alignment, it's a very important part of the OER quality, right? And the context is really important because, for instance, we have investigated some OERs in the context of programming languages, right? And this kind of OERs are much more difficult to find, and they have less quality if we compare with OER in software engineering or information systems, for instance, you know, because it depends on the content and the engagement of experts with users is really important in this point also, right? Because you need the specialist, the expert, but you need the users, the teacher of programming, the student of programming languages, and the teacher of software engineering, students of software engineering. We need this, both sides need to be engaged to build together a really good OER on that theme, and the content will be much more aligned with their expectations, right?
Thank you very much. There is another question. I think, would quality also depend on the context and learning outcomes envisaged? If that is the case, would it be better to, I think you just responded to the question. Okay. Are there any other questions? Can I ask a question? Have you worked with the traditional quality assurance higher education community?
Are you asking me?
Well, yes, to both
Yes.
of you. I mean, has there been an
Yes.
exchange? And if so, what were the points that came up, and how do you see things moving forward? And because in the end, the quality assurance community and the whole discussion on quality assurance is about ensuring that when OER is used, it's recognized as a good learning experience. It's also used for the credentials. It's on the chart as the chart you put up. So I think, please, Dr.
Yes, yes. I mean, we have had several conversations with mainly within the higher education sector with what are the quality outcomes that are expected from library services plus the faculty itself. And, you know, some of the things that resonate again and again is about, you know, how do we make, like as a faculty member, how do I identify the right information within? If I'm looking for something, how do I identify this is what I'm looking for to create learning materials? And how do we make that available to them or make it visible to them is one of those things that come up as a requirement. And there are also like the quality standards such as SLS that also are in discussion and is also pointed out in literature. So in our case, at least, you know, how we see is that these are great, you know, great tools, as you mentioned, Zainab, earlier, to in the creation state to say this is a, you know, sort of a minimum level that you need to surpass in order to be eligible or be qualified as good quality. But then when you want to, once you pass that, how do we then distinguish between, you know, between materials? Is that's when you need to, you know, at least in our requirement analysis, we came across a lot of things around relevance and trying to, you know, things like licenses, of course, the system takes care of it and it's an inconvenience rather than, you know, quality itself, like trying to find what license a particular material is, etc. But the topical contents and understanding that to discover from hundreds of thousands of material is one of the major things that they wanted to see in presenting metadata and information when choosing to explore, okay, is it worth for me to watch this video, even for me to, you know, before putting it in my course, for example.
Dr. Barbosa, would you like to?
I started my research in the past dealing with quality in software. talk a little bit about this in my presentation. Quality in software, and it's very difficult to guarantee the quality in software systems, and difficult to evaluate the quality as well. And the same for open educational research, right? But I think for software, we have more research. We are a little bit well organized than in OER, than in open educational research. So we don't have much effort on defining what quality is really is for OERs, right? We try to find some attributes, but how to put this in practice, really in practice, right? I think this is a very interesting point to go deep in research. If we provide the users some way to measure the quality and some guidelines to improve the quality of the OER, I think we can engage it better and really collaborating in developing the OER. When we are working together, I think the chances of having a good quality OER improves a lot, right? But we need to define some quality criteria, quality metrics, and to put this in practice. Not only let them in the literature. This will not work.
Thank you. I think we've had a very intense discussion. I'd like to invite you to just give one word or two words on how you see things evolving in this area. Just where you think things are going very quickly. Dr. Sahan.
Yes, I mean, what I see, at least in my agenda, is we are trying to understand how we can support AI with humans more and more, rather than having prescriptive AI. How can we create collaborative AI, where the humans can feed in their signal in a humanly intuitive way, but that also guides the AI much more effectively. So I see a lot of opportunity in quality management, quality assurance, for this to have a good, at least in the beginning stages, to have more progress, because at least at this point, the community understands what the expectations of quality are and how to measure them compared to objective metrics. And there is an opportunity there, I think, that would be interesting, which we are, for example, with X5 Learn, trying to get users to give us obvious feedback at first about if something is broken, if it's unclear, etc. But further and further, we can blur this expression and see how people learn to interact and give the right signals. That's kind of where I would see having some promising insights.
I see in the technological point of view, we need to improve our search mechanisms, as I told in my presentation. But in the human perspective, we need to motivate collaboration. We need to motivate, we need to engage people and by using and by developing OER and doing this together. Right, we are very isolated yet. I do my research. I develop my own OER, and only my group use this. And this is not the idea of OERs, right? So, in the human perspective, we need to engage people in this idea. We have to put effort on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, and thank you to all the participants. We're 2 minutes over over time. We would just like to inform the participants that we put into the chat the link to the OER Dynamic Coalition, and we'd like to invite you to join us by filling in the form so that we can keep you updated on different activities, and also invite you to share information on the activities that you're doing with the rest of the community through this coalition. I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Bulathwela, Dr. Barbosa, our interpreters, the technicians, and you, mostly participants, for joining us today. And we will be in touch with you shortly on the next upcoming OER Dynamic Coalition webinar. Thank you very much, and wishing you a happy day, afternoon, whatever time it is. Wish you the best. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.